The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it. It's a Wednesday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency for all of your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. Elijah Herbel and Will Wilson in with you on this Wednesday edition as we'll take you through what the next couple of days look like for Hail Varsity Radio here in just a second. But remember, as always, you can give us a call today, 402-489-1240 or 800-825-5865. That's how you get in contact with the show today. You can find and follow Will and I on Twitter at Herbal Essences for me, Elijah Herbel, and at Willie on the radio for Will. Find the show at H Varsity Radio or at Hail Varsity. Are all great places to find Hail Varsity Radio here on a Wednesday, as we've got plenty planned for you today. Is coming here in about 20 minutes. We'll have Mike Babcock join the show via the stream as Mike checks in for his usual Wednesday segment. We'll also, next hour, have Evan Bland joining us from the Omaha World Herald, as Evan's going to talk some Husker baseball and some College World Series. And then to cap it all off, a Jock Doc segment coming your way around 5:40 this afternoon. So that's what we've got on deck for you. But, Will, it's good to see you again. I think it's been 2 weeks since we last chatted with you here on Hail Varsity Radio. Any updates, major updates in the life of Will Wilson since the Hail Varsity Radio has last heard from you?
No updates. My facial hair is getting a little better. It's growing a little quicker. If you know me, I can't grow a beard. So
that's why you go for a mustache, right?
No, I can't grow a mustache either. I can't even talk today. What's going on? No, it's been good. I've seen you a lot, though. You've been helping us out on our show, so yeah, it's good to be back.
Yeah, busy time of year for Elijah Herbel. This is actually supposed to be for our local listeners the night of Elijah Herbel. It was going to be just Elijah Herbel wall-to-wall on KFOR. Yeah. And again, this is the Lincoln listeners, because it was going to be Hail Varsity Radio from 4 to 6, followed by 30 minutes of national programming afterwards, which would have been the break. And then at 7:05 tonight was scheduled to be first pitch in the Salt Dogs game tonight, and I was going to be producing back here in the studio for the Lincoln Salt Dogs tonight. So it was going to be Elijah Herbel from 4 until about 10 p.m., just all the way through. It was going to be a lot of fun. Alas, the Salt Dogs moved their game from today from 7:05, which was scheduled preseason, to being an 11:05 first pitch tonight. The Salt Dogs, I believe, fell in a walk-off fashion in today's game. So that's unfortunate. Yeah. It's unfortunate for the big Elijah Herbel supporters out there. I know they're few and far between, but they are out there. It was going to be a big night for you people, but instead, you're just going to get me on Hail Varsity Radio, and we're going to get back to normal programming later tonight.
You're welcome, by the way. If it wasn't for me, you would be sitting here at 7:05 waiting for the Salt Dogs game to begin.
This is true. I did not know the Salt Dogs game got moved up until about 30 minutes ago. So, I have my dinner in the fridge. I was all ready to go for a long night here at KFOR, and alas, no, I get to go home and read a book. I don't know what I'm going to do tonight now. I had my whole day planned around this. So.
I bet my firstborn son that you don't go home and read a book.
No, I'm halfway through a book. It's called Oathbringer. Brandon Sanderson, he's a Lincoln East grad. He's a really good sci-fi writer.
Really?
Shout out Brandon Sanderson.
Shout out East.
Yeah, he's currently I think a creative writing professor at either BYU or Utah or somewhere out west.
Wow.
And he's got a whole series of books. The Stormlight Archive is what they're called. Now I'm on book 3 of the series right now. There's 10 planned. I think he's got 5 out. So I've been trying to slowly work my way through those. They're long, arduous books. I've been enjoying them, though. So shout out. I guess if we're going to local flair, shout out Brandon Sanderson. I'm going to finish your book eventually. If you're out there, if you're a Husker football fan, you listen to Hail Varsity Radio, what are the odds of that? But if you are listening, hey man, really like your books. Appreciate it. Again, let's jump into what we got coming up the next few days for you here on Hail Varsity Radio. Schmitty's off to South Dakota, the land of, we'll say Listener Brennan, the land of Listener Brennan, as well as the Lincoln Southwest JV baseball team for the next couple days. So he's on the road to South Dakota as we speak right now. He'll be up there Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday before returning on Monday. So it's going to be Will Wilson and myself today. Tomorrow, we're going to have Connor jump in the show before the Salt Dogs game starts. We'll see what tomorrow brings. I'm playing it by ear as we go. And then Friday, a normal Friday lineup. Jacob Padilla, Brady Oltmans, and Bill Dolman, along with me, Elijah Herbel, here in the studio. And as for Saturday, we're going to be taking a hiatus from this weekend show as Brandon Vogel He has the next couple of weeks off, as well as Mark. He's on baseball dad duty as well on Saturday, and Schmitty's up in South Dakota, so it would have just left me being lonely here in the studio on a Saturday. Luckily, with the benefit of us being online only on our Saturday show now, an online exclusive, if you will, that Saturday show is being postponed this week to a week from Saturday. I think you could also call that the show being canceled for a week. I'm just going to call it postponed until a week from Saturday. And then on Monday, before we spend a week up at the College World Series, we're going to have a best of show for your Juneteenth national holiday. So expect a best of Hail Varsity Radio on Monday. And then next Tuesday through Friday, you can come visit us in Omaha, 2 blocks from the College World Series. We'll be at Zipline Brewing, their tap room, about 2 blocks from the stadium. We'll be there. We'll also have our friends over from Hurrdat, just right next door in the Slowdown, as the Slowdown has their outdoor stage and little communal outdoor area that Hurrdat will be hanging out. So you can go check out that. You can check out some live music, get some drinks, pop in next door and get some awesome beers with our friends at Zipline. So next Tuesday through Friday, Schmitty, myself, and I think Connor's going to make an appearance up in Omaha as well. We'll be at Zipline in Omaha, so go check us out there after this weird weekend where we have no Saturday show and a best of Monday. We're going to make it worth your time, despite the fact it's going to be a little weird. We're going to have live on-site shows where you can come see us next Tuesday through Friday, again, 4 to 6 in the Zipline tap room. We'll get you some more information on that a little bit later this week. But, well, let's dive into some of the topics we want to hit today. As I see Mike Babcock waiting in the green room, we'll talk to him here in about 10 minutes. We'll get his take on a topic we'll get to a little bit later this segment. But first, there was a video making the rounds on Twitter last night, Will. It was from Matt Rhule's online coaching clinic, where he went through some of his hallmarks for coaching, if you will, what he holds his assistant coaches to through the springtime, and he laid out the list. For brevity, I'm not going to play the full clip. It's a little over 3 minutes long. It doesn't make for great radio, so I'm going to list off what his goals and expectations were for his coaches. And we're hitting this because Matt Rhule was so confident in the abilities of a lot of assistant coaches that he's brought on staff that have little to no assistant coaching experience, at least at this level. You think of Terrence Knighton. Yeah, he played in the NFL. He coached in the NFL. He hasn't done it at a college level before. Garrett McGuire, we've talked about him because he's young. You have Wager, a guy who came up from the high school ranks in Texas, now to be an assistant college coach. And there were some doubts whether or not these guys would be able to hit the ground running, but Matt Rhule laid out in his coaching clinic what he expects of these coaches and how he not only coaches his team, but coaches his coaches through this time as well, which is something we hit on a couple months ago. And his list of what he expected from his assistant coaches in the spring was lengthy, and it's impressive. First, every single assistant coach is expected 1 weekly one-on-one interaction with every member of his room. So this it goes for all your position coaches, wide receivers, offensive line, defensive line, all that. You need to have at least 1 weekly sit-down in your office, in your player's dorm room, in their apartment, at a study spot, wherever it is. You need to have a 1 weekly sit-down one-on-one with every single player in your position group. Along with that, 1 weekly position group meal where you get together at the training table. Has to be on campus at the training table. Y'all sit down and y'all have yourself a meal together. Learn to get to know the players in your room and bring yourself together as a position group. You also have 1 semester positional bonding trip in which you can double up with another position group. Say your offensive line wants to go with your tight ends, wide receivers with corners, whatnot. 1 semester possession or 1 semesterly positional bonding trip where you say go play paintball, laser tag, go bowling, something like that. You have to get your position group out every single semester and get a team bonding activity together. Every single week, you need a weekly academic follow-up with every single member of your positional group, saying, hey man, I see you have a test coming up tomorrow, or I see your grades suffering in this class right now. What's going on? We're going to talk about academics here. We're not going to talk football. We're not going to talk personal life, just academics. Also, each player needs to have a time management schedule laid out with their positional coach to lay out a weekly schedule. Here's my lifting times. Here's my studying times. Here's my film room times. Here's the time with my girlfriend. That is going to be all laid out with your position coach, and you're going to have that time management schedule. You also have to introduce yourself to every single parent in your position group if that hasn't been done, and you need to have a semesterly weekly or a semesterly parental Zoom session in which your player and your parents need to sit down once a semester and discuss expectations, academics, what's going on off the field. You need to build that relationship with parents. You also need to have a goal-setting session with every single player in your position group in which you sit down one-on-one with them and set goals for a semester. And has he laid out, this is not, we're going to be all conference this year. It's going to be, I need to add 5 pounds to my lifting max in my squat, and I want to be 10 pounds heavier by the time this semester ends because that's what I need to be successful come fall. So you need to have a goal-setting session. You need to have a position manual to your coordinator and your head coach by spring break. Not only laying out what guys are in your room, but also what your plan is to develop these guys throughout this semester and throughout this year. So you need to have it written in stone. Here's what my position group looks like this spring. Here's what we need to work on. Here's what we're going to work on. Here's how we're going to do it. And also, along with that, you need to have a drill matrix and progression for how you're going to be doing your drills every single semester. We're going to start with this drill in the first week for this reason, and then we're going to move to this drill next week for this reason in order to show this is what we're trying to develop in a semester. And then at the end of all that, you have to put together a drill tape from your position group of what you guys got done in the semester and the progress that you saw from the guys in your room. That was just what these position coaches are expected to get done every single spring with their position group. So whenever you lay out that list, I laid out how long it was. I said it was a long segment.
Do they have time to eat?
The coaches?
Yeah.
I'd hope so.
My God, I mean that's a lot.
You get one weekly sit down with your team to go eat together, so there's your one meal for the week.
You get one meal, okay.
But this just goes along with what we said earlier in the year about Matt Rhule. Not only is he coaching up his players, he's coaching up his coaches, and we see that here. He's laying out his game plan. Like he mentioned in the thing or in the little video that he still has from his first spring ever being a coach, his write up of his room, what he wanted to do. With every single player in that room, how he was going to get them there. And he goes back and checks in on that just to see his own progression in coaching of here's how I've gotten better, here's all the things I know.
Yeah.
He does it every single year with a full team of here's what we have in the team. And it just shows the proof in the pudding that Matt Rhule will coach up his coaches to be good position coaches despite the doubts that have been around in Husker circles about what these position coaches can be.
I think there's got to be some people out there that see this and they say, okay, it's kind of cheesy, or is all of this really a thing that needs to happen? I'm sure some people say that, but I'm sure this is also something Matt Rhule's been doing his whole coaching career. I'm sure he's been making all of his assistants do this at Baylor and
Temple.
Thank you, Temple. I'm sure he's been making them do this, and it works. So knowing that, I'm happy with it. The other thing I think about is how. And I hate to compare things to the last regime, but I'm still going to. It's insane how different it already is compared. I mean, it seems like that list you just named off, it should have been made for Frost last year. You know what I mean? Did we think Frost was ever thinking about this for his assistant coaches? No, not at all. It's just so different, and I think it's good.
It's about having clear expectations and accountability. That's what it's about. It feels like the difference between a business which isn't well run and a business which is well run. Every single member of the team in a business, if we're going to use that as an example, which college football is a business. It's as simple as that right now. It lays out, hey, as a team member, this is what's expected of you. This is how you're going to go and show and prove that you are doing what's expected of you. And this is how you are going to be graded. Because at the end of the day, it's a business. If your team or if your position group isn't performing up to your standards, you have something you can go back to and say, hey, this is what we did this spring. This is what didn't work. Here's how we're going to work on it for next year. It's just a way to show accountability within your program, but also to the fans in the state of Nebraska. Like, this isn't some closely guarded secret from Matt Rhule of here's how we're going to evaluate our coaching staff. It's showing Husker Nation, hey, we have an evaluation from our coaching staff, and it goes down every single semester. Our coaches have to get this done. They have to develop in this way. They have to have a clear plan for how things are going to get better and how they're going to make things work better within their position group. That's what it shows to me is just almost, and I don't want to use this too willy-nilly because, as you said, I don't want this to be a shot at the previous coaching staff, but it feels like the grown-up in the room is sitting there with his coaching staff saying, all right, guys, I am going to have clear expectations for you guys. You need to live up to those expectations. If not, you're going to be gone. Here's how you live up to those expectations, and here's how you prove to me that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And you're proving to me that we are on an upward trajectory as opposed to stagnating or getting things done that aren't going to be helpful.
Well, and I like what you said going back to the beginning. These are new coaches. He's teaching them. He wants them to be successful. He wants them to get bigger jobs. That's I think the majority of this is him teaching them how to be good coaches.
Mm-hmm. So that was the update from Matt Rhule last night. We're going to get to Mike Babcock here in just a second, and I want to hit a theme that, I'll admit it, I stole from a college football analyst does a podcast every single week. I really respect his work. Josh Pate, he does the late kick. So 24/7. I'll give credit where credit's due. I really love the work that he does, and I encourage you to check it out because I don't want to steal from him without giving credit where credit is due. And he brought up in a mailbag segment of discussing some of the differences in college football and the NFL, and he was kind of looking at it from a stadium sense. But I want to get into what sets college football apart from other professional sports, namely the NFL, because college is different, but it feels like within the past months and years, college football has been moving closer and closer to an NFL model. It's been something we've talked about on this show that, hey, college football, the TV rights money is now what's running college football. We're going to have a playoff at the end of the year to determine a champion. We're going divisionless in our conferences, and we're going to have the top two play each other every single year. Just a lot of what we're seeing in college football feels like they're moving towards the NFL, and some of that can be good, some of that can be bad, but we're going to get into what we think sets college football apart, and we're kind of running up against a hard break here, but namely the one I think of is rivalries in college football and what they mean. That's an example of what I'm talking about here. Whenever you compare a rivalry of, say, Oklahoma to a rivalry, or Oklahoma-Nebraska to the rivalry of the Bears and the Packers. Yes, they're both rivalries, but the rivalry of Oklahoma to Nebraska feels like it means a lot more, and it's one of those things that I think makes college football college football. I want to get into Mike's take on that as we got to take a break here.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about that. I want you to dissect more about college being an NFL type thing. I want you to express that a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get into that with Mike Babcock. He's coming your way after the break here on Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Welcome to it, or I should say we roll through a Wednesday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. It's Elijah Herbel and Will Wilson taking you through the show today as we're joined by Hail Varsity historian and author Mike Babcock joining us here on this Wednesday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. It's a usual segment, if you will, as Mike joins us every single Wednesday. And Mike, how are you doing today? You staying cool as the weather begins to warm up again here in the capital city?
Yeah, I'm staying cool now that I got my yard mowed.
See, that's been one of the blessings in disguise for me over the past couple weeks is I haven't been having to mow my lawn as much because it's been dying, so it's not growing as tall. Thanks for that drought and Nebraska weather.
Oh, that reminds
my weeds don't die, though. That's the problem.
That reminds me. I was going to ask you if I could use your lawnmower. Mine is broke.
Legitimately?
Yeah, it keeps steaming up on me. But anyways, Mike, good to see you, man.
Yeah, come pick it up. It's yours.
Thanks.
Mike.
Yeah, mine will.
All right, fine.
Mike, let's dive into that topic that we hit to lead off before we get into this topic of what sets college football apart. And we also have a comment in from RI on the stream that I want to get into here in just a second as well. But first, Mike, your reaction to what we learned from Matt Rhule, that video going around Twitter of what he expects from his assistant coaches, not only every single spring, but every single semester to hold his assistant coaches accountable.
I think the initial response, you look at it and you say, yeah, gosh, he sure expects a lot from his coaches, and it filters down to his players. But then you think he's the guy that has to oversee all this stuff, so he has to go through all this from all the assistant coaches to make sure that things are going as he expects them to go. So it's a burden on him. Well, not a burden, I guess. He's the head coach. He accepts that responsibility, but it's a responsibility on him that's magnified by the number of assistant coaches, that's magnified by the number of players on the team. It's quite the thing for him to be able to connect with every player on his roster. When you're looking at the size of a roster in college football and the head coach trying to connect to all those players and the assistant coaches trying to connect to all the players in their room, and by extension, I think, a lot of players outside their room as well. I think it's a good thing. Now we have to see how it translates to what happens on the field. That's the bottom line. And, that's how he'll be evaluated.
From what I remember of Matt Rhule's introduction and how we reacted to it, we did call Matt Rhule more of the CEO type in college football, and that might be something Nebraska was lacking over the past couple of years. Do you think this is evidence of Matt Rhule, the CEO?
Yeah, I do. I think so, and I think that it probably is more so now than it once was. But back in the day when Tom Osborne was the coach and he was his own offensive coordinator, you can't. I don't think you can do that in this day and age. Frank Solich tried it. It didn't work out well for him. To do the offensive coordinator thing and the responsibilities of a head coach. And I think I'm using those examples, but I think that's the thing that probably is a positive in this day and age, is that he is the CEO. He oversees these things. He's not the offensive coordinator. He's not the defensive coordinator. He's the head coach. He takes care of all the areas of it. And I think that's the way Matt Rhule approaches things, and it probably was underscored by his experience in the NFL.
Mike Babcock's with us here at Hail Varsity Radio. And Mike, let's dive into that topic that I teased for you. And it's really open-ended. I'm really curious to just get your thoughts, and if you have a thought in the stream, if you want to give us a call, do that as well. But what does college football mean to you? What makes college football, I guess is a better way of putting that, because it's clear there's a difference, not only in skill and in quality, but in just the feel of college football in the NFL. And what, in your mind, sets college football apart from its NFL counterpart?
I've always thought it's the enthusiasm of the college players, because the college players as a whole are younger people. They're still trying to find their way in football. They aspire to play in the National Football League, but that's a whole different world, or it has been in the past, because at NFL you're getting paid. In college up to now you weren't getting paid. Now some of the players were getting paid, and it kind of changes the dynamic, because it used to be that you would say you're playing for the N on the helmet, not the name on the back. Okay, well, with NIL, you're kind of moving. You're walking a fine line there as a head coach to try to make sure that the guys are playing for that N on the helmet instead of themselves, because of NIL, because of the transfer portal, because of the opportunity. When you think about how many players, you've got 120, 30 players on a football team, 22 of them are going to be playing, and the rest of them are going to be backups, are going to be trying to work their way up. There was this kind of enthusiasm or dynamic that I think is less likely to exist now in college football because of the transfer portal, because of NIL. I think it's taken away some of that, because if it doesn't work out here, you can transfer somewhere else. If you're a skill position player, and I use that term, I think every position is skill position, takes that, but the traditional use of that term, you're more likely to get NIL money on a significant level than you are if you're an offensive lineman or maybe a defensive lineman, interior or whatever. So how do you make sure that, and we're getting back to what Matt Rhule did, I think. How do you make sure that the players are playing for that N on the helmet, and not a bunch of individual guys going out there? And that was the thing that I always appreciated about college football, was the enthusiasm. Same thing with high school football. I like watching that. The enthusiasm that those kids have in playing the game. And then as you said, the rivalries, Nebraska, Oklahoma, but we're losing those as well. We don't have that now. In the Big 8, it was great because every year you played everybody in the conference, and you knew those teams, and you developed rivalries within the conference. Now you don't play everybody in the conference. Conference, the term conference is kind of fading away here, because you just don't play all those teams on an annual basis. And we'll see how things go. Supposedly the schedule is set up so that every 2 years you'll have played everybody in the conference at least once. But it's a whole different dynamic.
We're talking to Mike Babcock. Mike, I wanted to ask you about Husker baseball. Rob Childress, now the pitching coach. Specifically, I know you covered him before. What makes him such a good coach? And also from the recruiting side, getting down into the Texas baseball scene, does that allow us to do that more easier now?
Well, yeah, it sort of magnifies things because, Will Bolt obviously has connections down there too. I hated to see Jeff Christie leave, but the pitching was probably not up to where they expected it to be this year. Rob Childress has a proven record. I thought when he came in, as an analyst, I thought, gee, it's not going to be very long before if he's interested, it's not going to be very long before he steps into the pitching coach role because he's so good at that. He has a proven record of that. And, I don't know, is this a step for him? He's the pitching coach. And, maybe is he looking to be a head coach at some point down the line? Or is he satisfied with where he is? Because there was some thought, at least I considered, maybe he doesn't want to be a full-time assistant coach. Maybe he likes being the analyst and, not having the responsibilities that go along with being a full-time assistant coach. But, when they were in need of someone to be the pitching coach, I was glad that they made the decision. It seemed to me an obvious one that they would hire him as the pitching coach because of his track record, what he's shown, how he's developed pitchers.
Mike, with College World Series in our mind, it gets going on Friday. I walk a fine line with this question. I don't want to anger any Husker baseball fans out there, but with Nebraska being in the Big Ten, what that's done to the baseball program as a whole, is Omaha still a realistic goal for the Husker baseball team to go make it to a College World Series? Is that still, I don't want to say within the realm of possibility, because in sports anything is really within the realm of possibility, but is that still a reasonable goal for Husker baseball fans to say, you know what,
yes,
a really successful season is Omaha?
Definitely. I definitely think it is. I think that's something that it's why Will Bolt came here, and I think that's one of the expectations, and that's not an unreasonable expectation that Nebraska gets to the College World Series. It's difficult because of the national perception of the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
The Big Ten did get 3 teams in this year. They didn't make it to Omaha, but I think that Nebraska, yeah, definitely that's to be a goal. I think Nebraska has the resources to do that. And you just have to be one of those 2 or 3 teams from the Big Ten that get enough recognition, which may mean winning the conference or certainly being in a position to win the conference to get in to get into the playoffs. And I think Nebraska can do it.
Is, in your opinion, Mike, last thought here, about 60 seconds, does the Big Ten and their national reputation surrounding what they do with baseball, is that fair? Michigan has a couple good years and their head coach leaves. Maryland has a good couple years, their head coach leaves, goes off to the SEC. Does the Big Ten deserve the reputation that it gets of not being a baseball conference?
Well, it's tough because of the Northern as opposed to Southern. You look at the teams that are in the College World Series, it's pretty much Southern teams, right? That's what happens. And it's more difficult, I think, for a team in the Big Ten to have the kinds of team to be successful to get to the College World Series. I don't think it's impossible. I just think it's more difficult. So the perception, I understand why the perception is what it is. It's just not warm weather, and that's not, it's not conducive to getting a good start on baseball, and you start your season on the road in order to get to play games.
It's Mike Babcock with us here. You can find him, follow him on Twitter at MDBabs. And Mike, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Who you ride in Omaha? Who's your team?
Wake Forest.
That's a popular answer.
Yeah, boy, there's no insight there, right?
Mike Babcock, kind enough to join us for a few minutes. Mike, enjoy the rest of your week. Have fun watching Wake Forest in the College World Series. All right, bud?
Hey, thanks, guys.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Wednesday rolls on here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency for all of your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. Elijah Herbel and Will Wilson taking you through the show today as I found this rejoin yesterday, and I forgot how good it was, so I'm adding it back into the rotation now. I did a really good job on this. And there's a lot of ones, like all these rejoins that I had to go and find yesterday as anyone who listens to the show yesterday heard the technical difficulties, saw the technical difficulties if you follow along with the stream. You saw me wanting to punch a wall. If there was any positive to take away from what we dealt with yesterday, I found that rejoin again. I had like a list of 20 that I made. This would have been during that COVID summer of 2020. And if we have any listeners that were listening back then, it was an awesome summer. We stayed on the air. We had our YouTube Tuesday segment every single week where we went back and talked with some notable Huskers about some really memorable Husker games.
I remember that.
We got into the fall. I spent that summer trying to make us some new rejoins with some new songs, and Schmitty hated all of them.
Yeesh.
Like, I got a list of 20 in there, and like I thought they were good. Now I go back and listen. I go, Schmitty had a point. Some of these are really bad. The Empire State of Mind one that I made that we just heard, that one was good.
Yeah, I think he's picky on the rejoin music. I mean, even the other day, I was like, hey, you should throw in some Dave Matthews Band on the rejoins. And he's like, I don't think so. And he's a big Dave Matthews Band fan. He's a big Dave Matthews Band fan. I would know. He calls him Dave. Real fans call him Dave.
He doesn't necessarily just go with songs he likes. There is a very real thing to that, and that's, as I went back and listened to some of the rejoins I made, some of them were just me being like, I like this song, let's put it in a rejoin. It didn't quite fit. Empire State of Mind, that one was good. That one was good. I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to throw it back in the rotation. Schmitty heard it yesterday, and like the look on his face of like confusion, but I was like, you know what? I kind of like this one too. I think it's good enough that I can keep it in the rotation. Let us know what you think. If you have any song requests for any new rejoins here on Hail Varsity Radio, it's been a hell of a week for that. Give us your song requests. Send me a tweet at Herbal Essences. Give me an email, Elijah@Hurrdat.com. I'll check your email there as well. If you got any song requests, now's the time to do it. I'll throw in some new rejoins for you as Will and we get back to our topic that we led off with Mike about what sets college football apart. And again, this came from Josh Payton, his podcast, The Late Kick. Encourage you to check that out. It's a great national college football podcast if you want to get a bigger picture on what the national landscape of college football looks like, and really a national perspective at times on Nebraska, his thoughts on that. It's good stuff. But he was asked the question, his mailbag, if you had the option between an NFL stadium and a college football stadium to go watch a football game, what would you pick? And his answer was definitively, I'm picking a college football stadium. And it sparked this in me of, man, what does set that college environment apart from an NFL environment? And as we heard from Mike, he laid it out for him. It's the passion and the rivalries and really the tradition. That's kind of reading in between the lines with what Mike said. Like the players, they're not playing for themselves. They're not playing for money. They're playing simply for their brothers next to them and to go win a football game. And that has started to go away in college football. And really a lot of the tradition of what we think of college football, like Nebraska's rivalries, Oklahoma, Colorado, like we get them during the non-conference slate now, but for the most part, they've gone away. It's new rivalries. It's Iowa. It's, well, for the past couple of years, not moving forward anymore, it was Wisconsin. And that's kind of the theme of college football within the past 5 years. It is changing. It's going more towards that NFL model. And I think it's a really interesting discussion of what should we as fans of the sport dig our heels in on and say, no, this is what makes college football college football. And to me, whenever I think of college football, whenever I compare it to the NFL, college football is the everyman sport. You know, everyone, regardless of whether you went to college or not, what school you went to, everyone has a reason to be affiliated with the school. For anyone who grew up in the state of Nebraska, you have a reason to support Nebraska. And it's because Nebraska is the only huge level sports team. I mean, and I don't want to give any disservice to Creighton, good basketball program, good baseball program. I don't want to discredit them, but Nebraska is the one that fills 90,000 seats every Saturday. Nebraska is the one that has people driving 6 hours from the Panhandle to come watch games every single week, and they've had season tickets dating back to the 1980s. And a lot of these people didn't even go to the University of Nebraska, but they have a reason to support the team, and you can go nationally with that. Everyone out there has a reason to support at least one school in the country. Even if you don't like football, there's a reason why you can get behind. People in Chicago can get behind Northwestern. People in Nebraska can get behind Nebraska because of that regionality and that everyman's factor. And that's what I worry about leaving college football as TV starts to rule. Like, it's something that we kind of hit on with that Nebraska-Colorado game, that a 10 a.m. kick in Boulder does not feel like it's for the people of Colorado and the people who are going to go watch the game. It's for the national audience, and that's a part of being the everyday man sport. But like, I think of the NFL and how so many fans have been priced out of the NFL in recent years because brand new stadiums are going up and you have to pay for that personal seat license to have the right to buy season tickets. And You're losing these cheap seats that people can go sit in, and they're being replaced by boxes where you can get, $50,000 per seat for season ticket costs, and it drives up the margins. You're going to make a whole lot more money in the NFL, but it's taken away that everyman nature from the NFL. Like, if I want to watch every NFL game, I still have to pay for NFL Sunday ticket every single season, hundreds of dollars every single year just to watch the NFL. And college football is unique in that, and Nebraska's an exception that their ticket prices have gone up somewhat still, but $50 per seat to go into a college football game makes sense with how inflation has risen. And college football, to me, still feels like the everyman sport. You can have a doctor sitting next to an electrician in Memorial Stadium on the bench seating because there's no difference in the bench seating. Like, everyone's got to go deal with the benches. And yeah, there's some people out there that get the club seating, they get the nice seat backs, people deliver food. But for the most part, Memorial Stadium is a place where no matter what your background is, you sit down and for 3 hours on a Saturday, your only care in the world is watching what's on the football field and cheering on Nebraska. And I feel like there's a difference between college and the NFL in that sense. And that, the NFL with these pricey seats and all these amenities within the stadium, it's appealing to the wine and cheese crowd more than it is the everyday man where everyone gets to come together. And your main focus is what happens on the football field, not the social event that is Husker football.
I agree. College is kind of getting closer to the NFL, but I don't know. I also agree that college football is the every man's sport, but I think the numbers show that more people are watching NFL, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of debunks with what you're saying.
Yes and no. Yes and no, because the NFL, it's an institution in this country at this point, and it's worldwide. The NFL is where college football hasn't reached that point, and I think that's kind of what makes college football special. In that, yeah, Nebraska isn't going to get the same draw as the Denver Broncos, but that's what makes it special, because the fans that do watch Nebraska have more passion than, like, everyone. I shouldn't say everyone, but for the large majority of this country, people have an NFL affiliation, whether or not they support the team or not. Like, people will say, oh yeah, my dad's a Broncos fan, so I guess you can call me a Broncos fan. Where in college football, there's a reason for why you are a fan, and it's deeper than what it is in the NFL. And that, yeah, I went to school there. I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska, so of course I support Nebraska. I grew up going to games there because, again, my parents could afford to take me to college football games as opposed to the $250 it is for nosebleed seats at NFL games. That's kind of the point I'm getting at, in that, yeah, the viewership numbers aren't the same, but college football is still the everyday man, or the everyman sport.
Yeah, in terms of money and, what you were just talking about, yeah, it's becoming more like the NFL, but college is always going to be college. It's always going to be different. It's always going to feel different. The stories, the rivalries, the players, the coaches.
But it's some of that's going away. Like, you look at the Big Ten, Nebraska's the only team they're playing year in, year out is Iowa. And yeah, that rivalry still sticks around, but playing Wisconsin and Minnesota and Purdue and Illinois every single year led to heightened feelings within Husker fans that are going to be going away as time moves forward, because you're not going to play them every single year. The only school in the Big Ten you're going to play every single year is Iowa.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
We're slowly moving away from what has made college football for the past 50 years, and I just think it's important to remember what makes college football as time goes on.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's going to feel the same as years to come.
We'll finish up hour one of Wednesday edition Hail Varsity Radio after this.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Rolling through a Wednesday edition, it's Hail Varsity Radio. We are presented by Currency. It's Elijah Herbel and Will Wilson taking you through the show today, as Will both hosts a radio show and plays Jeopardy at the same time. An impressive feat from the man, the myth, the legend, Will Wilson in the studio. I'm just giving him crap. He's doing a great job today. We appreciate Will filling in today, as, again, Schmitty going to be out the rest of the week. We'll hear from him next Tuesday as we head up to Omaha for our road shows from Zipline Brewing, 2 blocks from the stadium. You can join us up there Tuesday through Friday, 4 to 6 every single day. Come stop in, say hi, have a beer, go watch yourself some college baseball. And, well, college baseball is where we go now. The College World Series feels like, to me, this is what brings about the true start of summer in Nebraska.
Okay.
Is the start of the College World Series. Whenever the teams come to town, you get a chance to go to Omaha, enjoy the warm weather, enjoy some really, really high-level baseball. Yeah, sure, I guess you can indicate that the end of public school, the end of the public school year, that could be considered the start of summer in Nebraska. But I think for the average person, what really rings in the start of summer, and maybe this is just me, maybe I'm completely off base here, you can tweet at me if you think I'm an idiot, I think the College World Series is what rings in the start of summer within this state. I'm really excited for the field that we got this year.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun, and I would agree with that. It just feels like summer when it doesn't feel as much as summer, than when we had Rosenblatt. That the feeling with Rosenblatt was just amazing. But I would agree with that. It's been a long time since I was able to make it up to a game. The last game I remember going to was, I think, the Vanderbilt Virginia championship. I think that's who Vandy played. That was the last game I ever went to. It's been a few years, so maybe you and I got to get up there.
Well, yeah, come up, get a beer, listen to Hail Varsity Radio.
Yeah.
You and I can hit the nightcap one of those nights next week.
That would be all right.
Out there.
Yeah.
We go to the phone lines now where Roger's been patiently waiting. Roger, what do you got for us today?
Okay, I got the College World Series is great, and so is Nebraska baseball. But I have a big complaint about our announcer, Greg Sharp.
Uh-oh.
Why does he have to use all the crutches he uses, such as wave and a bump and a plate and the pillows? He's making himself look like an amateur announcer. We, as 83 years old, I've listened to a lot of baseball. He is a good announcer, but he doesn't need these crutches. And I'd just like to have your opinion.
Roger, I respect the hell out of Greg Sharp. I'll give you that right now. I grew up listening to Greg Sharp. I got a chance to travel with the Husker baseball team and really get the hands-on experience of what Greg does every single day. Calling baseball is difficult. I respect the hell out of Greg Sharp, and I think he's one of the best in the state right now in terms of play-by-play and in terms of being on the air. Greg, it's nothing but respect for me with Greg.
Well, that's okay. But do you agree that he doesn't need these crutches to keep an announcing?
I will say it's totally. I respect your opinion. It's being a commentator is one of the hardest things in the world for people like us who nobody's perfect. It's a tough job. You can't say perfect things every single word that comes out of your mouth. And I will argue for doing live radio the past 5 years, we all have crutches, and they're hard to break. So I agree. It's probably rough to listen to, but
he makes my contribution to the Nebraska sports a lot harder to do, because after 83 years, I've listened to a lot of broadcasters. Nobody's have to have a glossary of terms announced before they did their broadcast, because you don't know what a barrel is. You don't know what a pillow is.
Roger, we're up against a hard break here. You're entitled to your opinion. I'm going to disagree with you. I think Greg's one of the best out there, but we'll talk with Evan Bland after the break here on Hail Varsity.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back in, it's Hour 2 Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. Elijah Herbel and Will Wilson taking you through this show today as Schmitty's got the rest of the week off. To open up Hour 2, we welcome in Evan Bland with the Omaha World Herald. You can find him on Twitter at EvanBlandOWH. And Evan, you blink and it's College World Series season. We have the full lineup, the game scheduled to start on Friday. How are you doing as we've finally entered what I think a lot of people consider the true start of summer in Nebraska?
Yeah, that's right. Some thunderstorms on the way too, so you're feeling right at home in that regard. But yeah, it's always a whirlwind time of year. I mean, you get done with the regular season, and then 2 really fun weekends of NCAA tournament baseball, and it all sort of culminates this weekend, I think, with a field that has a little bit of everything. If you want star power, if you want an underdog, if you want a West Coast team, if you want somebody from the South, whatever, like this field has it. So this is kind of that moment where you take a deep breath and dive in and know that, like, as excited as you are on Friday and Saturday, the fatigue's going to hit around probably like Wednesday or Thursday. So, like, soaking it in, pacing yourself. It's a marathon, but knowing that the payoff's going to be fun at the end.
Evan, before we get into Husker baseball, I do quickly want to get some grander thoughts on college baseball as the College World Series gets going. First, what was your reaction to what went down in Game 3 in the Stanford and Texas Super Regional, where Texas loses the fly ball and the lights are in the sunset, and Stanford advances to the College World Series?
It was unbelievable. I mean, I can't think of an example of a moment that would clinch a College World Series spot for a team that could be any more just emotional. Like, if you're Texas, like, is there any worse way to lose than on what was a pop-up to shallow right center? And by all accounts, it should have been an easy catch, and you go into the next inning, right? Like, it was 6-all. You were going to continue to play extras. And, I mean, what a helpless feeling to lose a ball in the twilight and know that it was going to cost you your season in a moment. So, I mean, that was wacky. And then that came right after another moment that was really pretty surreal, where the Stanford hitter hits a line drive off the wall in left field, and it hits up against the white Pac-12 logo, and it looked like it was gone. And he takes his helmet off, and he almost gets thrown out at second base. So just a really crazy sequence. I mean, those were two teams that had been in Omaha the previous two CWS rounds. And so, you get Stanford back here for the third straight year. And, just a wild weekend between two teams that are playing at a high level, and we'll see how Stanford can maybe carry that momentum here this week.
Evan, are you like everyone else and you're riding Wake Forest to be the team to beat in the College World Series, or who do you like?
Well, I'm on record as saying my champ, and this was before the tournament began, was going to be Virginia. I just felt like they had the balance and the depth that maybe not a lot of teams had. I'm someone who puts a lot of stock in experience at this event, and some of those players still were here a couple of years ago when the Who's made it. Their coach, Brian O'Connor, has been to the College World Series many times. And I just think, so often you get these talented teams full of players that haven't been, and sometimes it takes a game to sort of settle in and get used to the crowd. And oftentimes, if that costs you a game, then you're playing from the loser's bracket. You're having to expend extra pitching, and it really just puts you behind the 8-ball. So, I suppose in that regard, Stanford would be the team that you feel like kind of has the rhythm down. But this is just one of those events, man, where you get into the fourth or the fifth game, and this happens every year. You look at kind of who's left on that staff, and inevitably there's some freshman or some bullpen guy who gets the start and will give you like a quality start, 6 or 7 innings, and sort of propel you on to the next round. And I just felt like Virginia was one of those teams that had a depth of pitching that could make that happen, and they had that experience. So that's why I went with them. But, there's the upside or sort of the front-end talent of LSU. When you talk about Paul Skeens, who could pitch in the major leagues this week, I think he's that talented. He and Dylan Cruz, the outfielder, those are two players who are going to go highly in the MLB draft next month. So, like, they have probably the front-line star power. Tennessee has some of the best velocity in terms of arms that you're going to see, along with Florida. So there are a lot of, name brand players and talent here. I just feel like this event, like I said earlier, is a marathon. And so it's not sort of the super regional format where you got to win 2 or 3. You're going to have to win 4 or 5. You may have to come back from the loser's side of things to finish it off. And I think that tends to serve the deepest teams this time of year.
Evan Bland with us here from the Omaha World Herald. It's Hail Varsity Radio. And Evan, let's switch gears here, talk some Husker baseball. We got to hear from both Rob Childress and Mike Sirianni as they've been announced officially as being the 2 newest members of the Husker baseball coaching staff. And Evan, I liked your story that you put up in the Omaha World Herald a little bit earlier today about what Rob Childress expects from his pitching staff. It's a couple of metrics that he says if they can follow those metrics short-term and long-term, the wins, the ERA, and the success of the Husker baseball program will follow.
Right, and Rob Childress has obviously been around pitching and high-level pitching for, decades. At Texas A&M, he constructed some of the best pitching staffs in Nebraska history before that. And, he said it today. One of the staff goals is to have the fewest walks per 9 innings allowed, and that's long been a Nebraska priority on the pitching side, and it's actually played out that way pretty well over the years. I mean, I think they were first in that category this year. They were first in that category last year. They've been first or second the last 4 years, so they've actually done a pretty good job of limiting those free passes. And then the other one is another pretty telling statistical metric too, which is the strikeout to walk ratio, and his goal on that is 3-1. So 3 strikeouts for every walk that you issue. I thought even more than just the statistical benchmarks, what he sort of laid out today in terms of how he shares those expectations with his players is interesting. He said, these guys in high school, when you talk about allowing a hit per inning, all the guys who are going to play college baseball have done something similar to that. When you talk about striking out 3 guys for every guy that you walk, that's something that most of these players do in high school. So, his thought process was, let's not put too much on these guys. Keep your delivery simple. Keep your expectations in line with what you've done before, and that tends to take pressure off, and then that sort of leads to all the other stuff that you mentioned with the ERA and the wins and the strikeouts. So keep it simple. Do what you did. Have a little bit of an attitude about you where maybe you don't want to give up that ball at the end of a start because, you just have that much confidence in your ability. I mean, those are the goals. And then what we've talked about for a long time and what Nebraska has identified as what's been a weakness too is pitching depth, right? Finding more trustworthy arms out of the bullpen, knowing what you're going to get when those guys trot up to the mound in the middle of a game. That's clearly a priority. You look around college baseball and the regionals and the College World Series, those teams all have depth of arms to some degree. And so that's something that Nebraska has identified and is working towards. It looks to get back into the postseason.
Evan Bland with us here from the Omaha World Herald. And Evan, as you talk about the depth of arms, how important do you think the other new assistant, Mike Sirianni, is going to be in that? He's been the recruiting coordinator at Wichita State and has, by all accounts, done a good job at Wichita State being able to bring in talent. How important is he going to be as Nebraska looks to bolster the depth, not only in its bullpen, but really across the whole team as they try to reset for what should be a huge 2024 for Will Bolton Company?
Yeah, I think he'll be a factor. Even just today in chatting with him a little bit, he's like, I don't even know what some of my in-season duties will be or all this other stuff. It was just about hitting the ground running on the recruiting front and trying to build out the roster for the 2024 team and then looking ahead and starting to build out your classes beyond that. But I mean, it's pretty clear, like that's his strength as an assistant coach. Like you mentioned, he was the recruiting coordinator at Wichita State for 4 years. He's been a head coach at the Division II level at Regis out of Denver. He played at Creighton. He's from Indianola in Iowa. So he's been around the Midwest, and he has a zeal, I think, for recruiting. And he spoke at length about how, as a player himself, the recruiting process was something that allowed him to kind of discover who he was and who he wanted to be in college and beyond. And so I think that's something that really drives him now as he's looking for players to come to the Huskers moving forward. And he said sort of the template for what he's looking for in recruits would be speed, would be power, versatility, not necessarily all that different from what Nebraska's found or been searching for before. But he's going to have a drive about him where he's not going to leave any stone unturned. And so we'll see, how that translates out. But certainly he put together some good classes with the Shockers. And, when you're looking for a depth of talent, whether in the lineup or in the pitching staff, that's a lot of work. You're going to have to find some guys who maybe are a little less obvious as candidates. And so I think his track record in identifying moldable clay, so to speak, is pretty good.
Evan, when you look back at what Wichita State's had on their roster over the past couple of years, the two themes that really jump out are the areas around Wichita State. Nebraska, Kansas, and Iowa is a big theme, but then about half their roster is from Texas. And I want to get your thoughts on whether or not that's a recipe for success recruiting to the Big Ten, recruiting to Nebraska. Is Texas somewhere you can go, similar to what we've seen with Matt Rhule and the football team in recent months?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it would help more if you were in a league that plays in Texas occasionally, which was what really got Nebraska rolling in the Big 12. back in the day. But, I mean, I think at some point you have to just be kind of honest with yourselves as a program and as a staff and recruit to where you feel like you can find the best talent. And obviously it starts in-state, but I think from there it goes out to the junior college level. That's a place where Nebraska's hit, and that's a place where their coaches have extensive connections. But the state of Texas is clearly one of those as well. I mean, that's where Will Bolt's from. Rob Childress, they work together at Texas A&M there. Lance Harvell, who's the current recruiting coordinator at Nebraska, is from Texas. Worked at Sam Houston State. So, I mean, you can kind of just go up and down the roster there and see where it just makes sense. Like, that's where you have a lot of relationships with coaches, and you can just kind of build it out from there. Now, I don't know that it's necessarily paid off a ton to this point, but you know, you had a guy like Mike Sirianni who is ready to pound the pavement and has a pretty discerning eye of his own. You know, maybe that can help tip the scales a little bit. And I think part of it, too, is you just need to see a little bit of success. I mean, Nebraska's recruiting at a pretty decent level still. They're right around the top 100 out of 300 Division I schools. They tend to be year in and year out. But, you know, make another run to a regional like they did in 21. You know, get a couple high draft picks like they're going to do this summer with Max Anderson and Bryce Matthews. And sometimes that momentum can get rolling from there. So, we'll see how that picks up, but I think, yeah, they'd absolutely be willing and probably are focused on adding some talent from that state moving forward.
Evan, before we get you out of here, I want to switch gears, talk some football, and get your thoughts on a topic we hit pretty extensively back in hour one. And I want to get your thoughts on what the untouchables in college football are. We're in a season of change, conference realignment, conferences expanding, TV really becoming the be-all, end-all in college football, as it feels like college football is moving more towards that NFL model. What do you think makes college football unique, and what do you think are some of the hallmarks of the game that, as we enter this era of change, need to remain in college football to set it apart from its NFL and professional sports counterparts?
It's a big question. I mean, there's a lot of ways you could go with that. I think in terms of the on-field product, something that sets college apart is the diversity of scheme, especially on offense, where you know, you're not seeing any NFL team really run the option. You're not seeing any NFL team, you know, there's just generally a pro-style element to it. Not to say that there aren't exceptions to that, but an NFL offense tends to fit into a smaller scope than what you would see in college. So I think that's one thing that's part of the charm. You know, another thing that's sort of eroded in this era of realignment has been sort of the regional nature of college football. Like there's, you know, 15 years ago, you could make a day trip to most of Nebraska's conference rivals. You could go to Iowa State and back. You could go to Kansas or Kansas State or Stillwater or whatever. And it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to do that now. So I think you're losing some of that. It's still there a little bit, but I think that's been something that's really marked that sport as well, where you win your conference and then it becomes a national conversation, as opposed to what it's becoming now, where you're having, you know, a national conference, a true coast-to-coast conference in the Big Ten. It's just a different sort of dynamic to the thing. And then I think the other thing would just be, you know, the fans' relationships to the players. Like, you're getting to know some of these guys when they come in as 18 and 19-year-olds. In some cases, fans start to get to know them during the recruiting process when they're still in high school. And at the end of 3 or 4 years, if things go well, you know, they're all conference players, they're NFL draft picks, and then you can kind of see how their careers go from there. So I think it's a different dynamic than what you would see in the NFL, where you sign a guy and he's under contract. Like, in a lot of cases in college football, you get to see these guys grow up and root for them maybe at a little bit of a different level. So I think there's maybe a little bit more of a personal nature, I suppose, in some ways, to college football compared to the NFL as well.
Find him on Twitter at Evan Bland, OWH. Check out his work with the Omaha World Herald. It's Evan Bland joining us here, Hail Varsity Radio. Evan, appreciate you taking about 15 minutes out of your afternoon today, and we'll see you up in Omaha for the College World Series.
Thanks for having me, Elijah.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Rolling through a Wednesday edition here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Elijah Herbel and Will Wilson taking you through the show today as we fill in for the man, the myth, the legend, Chris Schmidt off in South Dakota, watching his son play some baseball over the weekend. So we really appreciate Will stepping up here and filling in on a Wednesday show. Will, you going to be back tomorrow?
Yeah, maybe. Let me get back to you.
We'll play it by ear. That's kind of been the theme of Elijah Herbel's week this week. We'll play it by ear. See what happens. It makes for good radio sometimes.
Yeah, it does.
Kind of like the end of last hour whenever you take a call and he wants to talk about the voice of
wasn't that interesting?
Yeah, I do want to reset that and just say I've gotten some texts, I've gotten some tweets. Greg Sharp is very well respected in this state, and that I am included in that list of people who really respect Greg Sharp. I want to reiterate that I think you're entitled to your opinion.
Yeah.
I think that caller was entirely off base there with what Greg does. Not only calling Husker football, so his work with Sports Nightly and his work with the Husker baseball team. It's not easy. It's not an easy job to be able to transition between those three with how well he does it. Very talented man Greg Sharp is, and respect the hell out of him. So I want to make sure that we reiterate that.
Yeah, I mean, you can't please everybody.
Can't please everybody. That's true.
You can't please everybody.
I will say selfishly, I'm glad you didn't call in and say, man, this Elijah Herbel guy sucks.
You probably would have not fought him on it either.
I mean, yeah, he's not wrong.
Shut up. That's not what I was saying.
He's not wrong. This Elijah Herbel guy does suck.
But let's put him on the radio and see how he sounds. That's what I'd say.
Well, he just was on the radio. And you know what? He brought up his points in a very clear and concise way. It made an argument. That's all radio is. So maybe he's got a future in that. I think it was Roger calling us. So
Roger,
you're entitled to your opinion. I don't mean to bring it up just to say I disagree with you yet again, but I do kind of bring it up for that reason. I really like Greg Sharp. I just want to reiterate that as I've seen some reaction to that. But back to the theme of playing it by ear this week. In the past 30 minutes, I have confirmed that tomorrow we'll have longtime umpire. He umpired 8 College World Series, Jeff Hendricks. He's going to join us. A Lincoln East grad from around here. I know he spent a lot of time up in professional baseball as well before becoming one of the faces of college baseball umpiring. We're going to get his thoughts on the College World Series. Also, I know he spent a lot of time umpiring for one... my mind has gone blank. Where was I going with that?
I don't know. Certain team?
I got it back. He spent a lot of time umpiring for Rob Childress, and I know he's got a relationship with Rob, so we're going to get his take on what that hire means as well, and also some College World Series memories because he's really seen it all. Rosenblatt to TD Ameritrade, that Oregon State game where they dropped the foul ball and end up losing the game. He's seen it all. We're going to get into that with him tomorrow. 5:05, you can expect that interview with Jeff Hendricks. Really excited for that. But Will, before we get to our Jock Doc segment, where I want to go with this segment is I think it's another segment after an hour one where there's no right answers to what makes college football. It's another segment with no right answer, so feel free if you're listening at home, you want to give us a call, 489-1240. You can give us a call or chime in on the stream, give us your thoughts. Well, what's your thought on this Big Ten mission, or it feels like with how they've scheduled over the past couple of years to increase parity within the Big Ten? In the long run, is that, do you think, going to be good for college football? Because you look back at college football and we talk about the tradition of college football, and Dynasties has been one of those threads that carries throughout the entire modern era of college football. You think back to the 80s and you think back to what Oklahoma was doing under Switzer. The 90s, you think of Nebraska. In the early 2000s, you think both of Oklahoma and of Florida, their greatness. And then from 2008 up until maybe 2 years ago, it was Bama and the Bama dynasty, and now it feels like we're entering this era of the Georgia dynasty. The dynasty and who's running college football and who's running the conferences at any given time is one of those things that feels like it is just a part of college football and really a part of sports in general. So I'm going to get your thoughts on this new Big Ten schedule, 2024-2025. It feels like it's on a mission with the revolving schedule where you really do play everybody and you don't have divisions. You get to adjust the schedule on a year in, year out basis based on how good teams are in order to appease the TV markets. It feels like it's a mission from the Big Ten in order to increase parity within its own conference and create some more competition. I want to get your thoughts on whether or not the effort from the powers that be in college football, from the conferences to the NCAA as a whole, to increase parity is a good thing for the sport whenever dynasties have been one of the prevailing themes of college football for the past 50 years.
Well, I am trying to figure out how this new schedule is increasing parity. You'll have to explain that to me. I mean, how is playing everybody increasing parity?
Well, it's because, like, as we kind of talked about with slumming in the Big Ten West, Nebraska's schedule featured more Big Ten West teams than Big Ten East teams. So the Big Ten West is this gauntlet that you don't have to go face the powers in the Big Ten East as much as you would if you were in the Big Ten East. So by getting everyone to play each other, you're now getting more competition, and therefore I think the goal is more parity. And you can't increase parity. It has to come organically from within the program, but giving teams a chance to play Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan more increases your chances of increasing parity, because it increases your chances that like if you have Maryland playing Ohio State every single year, I think we can say pretty confidently that Ohio State will win more games if they play 100 times against Maryland than they would against what we've seen from Wisconsin or Iowa or Minnesota in the past couple of years.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
In terms of, if it's good, it's bittersweet. The reason that these national championships are having, groundbreaking views, it's been going up each year. It's because people want to see if, Georgia can keep it going, if they can win 2 in a row, 3 in a row. Like, that's fun. That's impressive. It's very impressive to see multiple national championships won. So I get that part. But also, you want to see other teams get in it, and you like underdogs. I'm an underdog guy.
Of course.
Love underdogs.
Who isn't?
Exactly. Who isn't? So it kind of takes away from that. But, yeah, like I said, it's bittersweet. It goes both ways.
On one hand, I root for the underdogs, but on the other hand, I still go shopping at Walmart, if you get what I'm saying there. You follow what I'm saying? On one hand, I root for the underdog in sports and life and whatnot. It feels natural. But on the other hand, hey, Walmart's got those good prices. I know what I'm going to get from Walmart. I know I'm going to get low prices. I know I'm going to get good selection, which I can't necessarily say for the local corner store.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel about college football, too. Like, yeah, I root for the underdogs. But at the end of the day, like, I know what I'm going to get from Georgia and Alabama and those schools. And it's important to have dynasties in college football to know that here's the school that everyone's going to be trying to take down this year.
But let's not act like it's scheduling that's the leading cause of parity. The teams that we are seeing continuously are good teams. And they have a good thing going.
And I think this is kind of part of my argument in that, is scheduling to increase parity a good thing in college football? Like by giving Ohio State and Michigan and USC and UCLA harder schedules year in, year out, is that how you want to increase parity? Because I don't think you want to increase parity by dragging the dynasties down to the levels of everybody else. Saying, yeah, you have to play a harder schedule now because you are so dominant. I think the way to increase parity is to have these schools like Iowa and Wisconsin and Minnesota go and up the amount of resources they're putting into their program. Hire a football coach that you have to pay more money to. Like increase your fan support. Try to drive more NIL money up in order to go compete with the Ohio States and Michigans of the world, as opposed to, you know what, we're going to make the Big Ten schedule a gauntlet for everybody so that Ohio State and Michigan has to play more talent every single year.
Yeah,
so that,
I get that.
There's the argument of, yeah, TV dollars are running the sport, but like also let's not confuse this by saying that, like, yeah, the Big Ten wants more parity. They want schools like Minnesota and Iowa and Nebraska and who else that hasn't been successful in the past 10 years when you look at the reigns of dominance of Ohio State and Michigan. Yeah, you want them to go up and compete, but do you want to do that by making the road for Ohio State and Michigan or USC more difficult by the schedule that you have put in place?
Yeah. I would also argue that parity does a good thing, and it's like going back to what we said about underdogs, there's nothing better to when a powerhouse loses, right? A team that's won so much and they lose. I don't know, it makes it better, when a team is that good. I'd argue that.
And if I'm way off base here with this argument, give me a call, 402-489-1240. I'm kind of thinking out loud here with this segment in that I agree. Parity is always going to be fun. Like TCU making the championship or the college football playoff last year and then eventually making the championship game. That was fun for college football, but look at what the national championship game looked like.
It was bad. It was awful. Terrible. But I would also argue that NIL is causing more parity than scheduling is.
And this is what I think is how parity should be approached in college football. It's giving the schools the ability to use NIL isn't dragging down the Ohio States and Georgias and the Alabamas in any sense.
No,
If you follow what I'm saying, they have the same ability as any school anywhere else in the country to be able to go to their donors and say, hey, we need this much money. We're going to have fundraising drives. We're going to try to open up to the fans, whatever we need to be able to get a competitive roster. That's a level playing field by giving everybody the same NIL. And you've seen what happens, like a school like Texas A&M, who is a very good football program, don't get me wrong. They're able to bring in classes in the past couple of years that are punching way above their weight of what they've traditionally been able to recruit, because guess what Texas A&M has? Oil money. And that, in the long run, is good for the SEC. If you can get a Texas A&M squad that's able to go recruit the state of Texas better and go recruit nationally better in order to go compete with the Alabamas and the Tennessees of the
so
world.
far it's not working for them.
So far it hasn't worked for them, don't get me wrong, but I think this is the way that parity should be approached in college football.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. It's part of the game, right? You're always going to have a dynasty. You're always going to have, just a powerhouse of a team. There's nothing you could do about it. It's just how it is. I'm okay with it. I'm not going to sit here and complain about parity because
no, I'm not either. And that's not what I want this segment to be. I don't think it should be. If that's your takeaway from this, that Elijah Herbel doesn't like parity and he wants Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State to run college football, I have done a terrible job conveying my point, and that's not what I'm trying to say here at all.
Well, and maybe the 14 playoff you could blame for that. As when we expand, we may get less parity. Who knows?
We could get more parity in a 12-team playoff. Do you think we get more parity in 12-team playoff? Because you are making...
No, I think we get less parity.
In a 12-team playoff?
Yeah, because you have more teams that could win.
So you have more parity.
Oh, maybe I'm...
Do you have your parity backwards?
Maybe I need to study up on the term parity.
But then I also look at that, and maybe I'm now arguing against myself here when I look at a 12-team playoff, because I go, you're giving the top dogs a harder path to get to the college football playoff.
Okay, so we are completely
I'm arguing
here.
In circles here.
No, it's me. I think I can blame I always thought parity was the same thing, getting the same, people winning and the same teams winning and year after year.
No,
the same.
No, the NFL is known for its parity because it's any given Sunday. That's high parity whenever anyone can win any given Sunday.
So I'm completely off base.
Yeah, what a segment we just put together here, you and I, Will. I'm arguing in circles. You're confusing the definition of parity. I hope all our listeners at home are...
Hey, it's more embarrassing for my part. Yeah.
The people at home should have called in and said something to us here as we wrap up this segment.
Yeah, this has been a useless segment now. Thanks to me. God, how embarrassing. Whatever.
Yeah, leave us a review, good, bad, or ugly, based on this segment here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Check us out in podcast form. If you like what you just heard somehow, give us a positive review. Subscribe. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music are all the places you can do that. Or check us out on the Hail Varsity YouTube page as well if you want the video version every single day. We're going to step aside another 3-minute commercial break. When we return, we're going to sit down another Jock Doc segment. Today we talk to Liam Hendricks.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Time for a Jock Doc Wednesday. Nebraska Orthopedic Center Dr. Brandon Seifert with us to talk Liam Hendricks. Dr. Brandon, how's your week? Thanks for the time.
You bet, buddy. Week's been great. How about you?
We're doing all right. We're getting ready for a roadie to South Dakota as we talk, and we'll see how baseball goes. What a story on Liam Hendricks. Returned to the majors after undergoing treatment for cancer. No structural damage to his right elbow. And he's hoping for a minimal stint here on the injured list. Got placed on the 15-day IL. Had inflammation in his pitching elbow. But Dr. Brandon, I was interested to kind of get your thoughts here on, we hear about athletes that deal with cancer, but you had a non-Hodgkin lymphoma here with Hendricks, and the toll that can take on the body. And wanted to get your thoughts on just the elbow and his return to play here at age 34.
Yeah, what an amazing story. Absolutely. You think about a gentleman going through cancer treatment, obviously all the medications he's utilized and the impact that can have on the body. So pretty incredible. He's even here getting back, even talking about playing in the pros, but as we transition into kind of his elbow issues he's having, clearly it sounds like they're kind of headed down that inflammatory pathway. It sounds like they've ruled out kind of big structural issues. As you kind of read between the lines here about some of the history he's had, at least with this elbow, it sounds like he's had a partial kind of UCL or kind of partial Tommy John injury in the past. That was a pretty low grade, and they basically treated him with some rehab and some other modalities in the past and have been doing quite well. So, this could potentially be a little bit of an inflammatory response related to that. Although with the recent MRI, it sounds like things actually looked better. Looks like he's developed some scar tissue, and that area is kind of healing. So now you start dealing more with, you say, okay, why are you dealing with this now? What's the scoop? Just from a structural perspective, we're talking about kind of that inside part of the elbow. There's a big muscle group called the flexor pronator group that basically hooks onto that inside part of the elbow. If you kind of feel over where the funny bone is, the medial epicondyle, that's where that group attaches. The ligament also kind of runs there as well. And it's very common in arthro, especially early in the season, to have issues over that area. Obviously, you worry about him, and even the article talked about this, is here's a guy who's going through cancer treatment. He's probably missed his normal, preseason routine. So maybe there was a little bit of some kind of rushing on his part to try to get back with this. It's hard to say, but that probably played a role here. But again, this is quite a common area to have inflammation if you're maybe don't initially transition through that return to throwing program appropriately, or just in general, you tend to kind of really flare up this area depending on the volume of pitches. You can kind of tweak this area pretty easy. So it's probably one of the above with some of the at least structural things.
Dr. Brandon Seifert with us here, Nebraska Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. Liam Hendricks with the White Sox. Our topic is he's trying to shake off some rust, and at least it is more of a non-use than a repercussion from some of his cancer treatment. Dr. Brandon, let's go into what some of the PRP injections can do for that area, that elbow region. That's where the White Sox staff, they've turned to.
Yeah, and so lots of those great modalities that are out there. PRP is a really nice one to use. It sounds like they even utilize a little bit of steroid with this, which is reasonable. The PRP, essentially what that is, we've chatted about that before. Platelet-rich plasma is the fancy term for that. And essentially what it is we draw some blood out, put it in a centrifuge, we spin that down, and we grab this kind of top layer of fluid that's just filled with lots of great healing factors. One of the important ones in there is called platelet-derived growth factor, really an outstanding kind of healing agent. The issue with any type of tendon pathology is there's not a lot of great blood supply in that area. So once you kind of get that inflammatory process going, it's hard to kind of get that to turn off. It's hard to get a lot of those healing factors in that area to kind of turn that process off and start the healing process. So the theory is utilizing PRP puts a lot of those healing factors, growth response factors into that area that can change this process to more of a healing versus inflammatory response. And that's the goal of the PRP.
Dr. Brandon, now let's dive into the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, the cancer treatments that Liam Hendricks has been going through to fight and being so courageous, his battle, and it's awesome that he's back on the hill. Interested, what, just in your opinion and just background, the reality of some of the medicines to keep him alive and keep him fighting, what that can do and does do to the body when it comes to the athlete pre-cancer, the athlete battling back post-cancer treatments?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. You start to weigh that into this scenario. Absolutely. So, there's a couple of different scenarios that happen here. So one, you're utilizing the chemotherapeutic agents to help treat the cancer. And so obviously that's causing cell death. And so kind of rapid turnover cells, which can be involved in an inflammatory response, that could potentially be targeted by the chemotherapy, which you're using for something else. So that's part of it. Also, with those chemotherapy agents on board, that sometimes can create kind of a even increased kind of immune response. And so oftentimes we'll have patients that have kind of joint issues, joint inflammatory type issues. So now you're using a joint significantly, your elbow, your shoulder with throwing. And so they tend to have more what we call kind of a synovitis type picture where the tissue that surrounds the joint can be involved. Not saying that's happening here, but as a possibility. And then just in general, you have, these extra medicines on board. Your body's obviously fighting some big systemic disease. And so now you're diverting resources to different things in your body. And so your potential to heal one particular area, you're dividing resources. So it might take you longer to get over something like that, to heal. And that's probably part of this as well.
Dr. Brandon Seifert's with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. Liam Hendricks of the White Sox He is dealing with elbow issues and also battling back from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. His fastball, I'm air quoting here, so play along with me, only in the mid-90s. But that's down. That's down from being that electric triple-digit option. Dr. Brandon, can he get that type of velocity back if he heals up, or do you think that might just be a reality now?
Yeah, that's interesting to think about that. And so, structurally, if he looks good, Chris, if that, Tommy John ligament looks good, if he can get into that kind of appropriate, we call that late cocking phase, you can really get that elbow and shoulder in a position to generate that power to come forward and velocity. Then I think structurally, if he looks good, I think there's a potential he'll get that back. Some of this you wonder with all the treatment he's going through, is he had maybe a little bit of some atrophy, a little bit of some muscle loss, and maybe that's part of this. So then there's again potential there if he can rebuild his muscular endurance and strength. Maybe he's able to reobtain that velocity. So I think it's a possibility, but unfortunately it's probably multifactorial at this point, and so not guaranteed he'll get it back.
Last thought here, Dr. Brandon, from a conditioning standpoint, we know how important that is for pitchers. Is that a concern, or can he get back into game shape on the mound despite all of the treatments he's received?
I think so. Again, the high-level athlete like him already was really well-trained going into this. I think that fitness level will be pretty darn close. Clearly, if you're measuring it at that high level, it's not going to be what it was, at least initially here. But I do think in time he'll recover, and I think that fitness level has the potential to return to a pretty high level.
Dr. Brandon Seifert with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. Dr. Brandon, take care. Thanks for the time.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Big shout out to Schmitty for leaving us a Jock Doc segment for this Wednesday as we caught up with Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Dr. Brandon Seifert will wrap up a Wednesday edition of Hail Varsity Radio after the break.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Wrapping up a Wednesday edition, it's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency, Elijah Herbel and Will Wilson, and you, the listener, joining us today on this Wednesday as well, as you've dealt with a bit listening to this Hail Varsity show. We do appreciate you sticking with us here as we fill in for Chris Schmidt off to South Dakota. Well, he'll be back in next Tuesday as he's watching his son play some baseball. I do want to thank you, the listener, and you know who you are if you're out there chiming in, giving some suggestions, some requests for some new rejoin bumper music. We've already gotten The Games People Play by Alan Parson, projects requested. We've also had Hocus Pocus by Focus requested by Matt, as Matt working on some storm damage from his house. He says on the stream, Matt, we're thinking of you in this time. Gotten some storm damage on my place, some shingles blown off recently within the past couple weeks, so I get that. I feel that. We're with you. Good luck with all the storm damage. We're sorry you're dealing with that right now. We also have a thought in on the stream from R.I., who asked a question. I meant to get this today. I think we're going to save it for tomorrow. Without naming names, what would be the best parts in order to create the perfect Nebraska football coach? He says, like a Build-A-Bear, but with coaches. He says he wants the recruiting of Callahan, the demeanor of Bo, the personality of Riley, and the understanding of culture like Frost. And he says he thinks maybe Matt Rhule could be a good mixture of all of those. I think we're going to get into that on the show tomorrow as Connor Clark joins us from Haymarket Park tomorrow for the first hour of the show. Already laid out earlier, we're going to have a call from Jeff Hendricks as well, longtime College World Series umpire, so a lot to get into tomorrow. But, well, first, before we get into all that, well, I guess that's coming tomorrow. I think this story of the Oakland A's, you brought it to my attention here this afternoon, and I saw it last night. I think it's pretty great. They had what would you call it, a reverse boycott of the A's last night as they packed the stands, and they had a pretty cool moment as in the top of the fifth, they waited 55 seconds into the inning to represent the 55 years the team has been in Oakland before.
Seth gets it back in. Crowd goes silent and now getting very loud at the Coliseum.
And if you can't understand what the A's fans are chanting, that is sell the team. They're chanting, and this obviously comes in reaction to the planned move of the A's to Las Vegas after The A's really refused to put together a winning baseball team, so the A's ownership says, well, the fans don't support in Oakland, we got to move to Las Vegas. And the fans say, no, we support the team, we just don't support what you've been putting on the field over the past decade or 2 decades. So that was an interesting moment in MLB, to say the least.
Yeah, it was amazing. And the place was packed. They had over 30,000 fans there, I believe. And it's amazing. It's one of the coolest things I've ever seen watching the MLB. Also, I guess it's cool, even though I don't want to give the A's credit, but I don't know if you saw this. They donated all ticket proceeds from last night's game to charity today. So they're not benefiting off any of that last night, which is kind of cool.
It's respectable.
Kind of respected. But it's amazing. It's awesome. And to make it even kind of cooler, the A's are winning. They've won like 7 straight. Mm-hmm. Including 2 over the Rays.
Yeah, now the Royals are now in the basement of the MLB.
My God, they are bad, and I don't know if you saw, they just lost Vinny Pasquantino. He has to get season-ending shoulder surgery, so it gets worse. Yeah, the Royals, they'd be lucky if they win 35 games this year.
Well, that'll do it for us here on a Wednesday. Check out the podcast wherever you get podcasts or the Hail Varsity YouTube page, and check us out tomorrow, as that's going to be, as I laid out, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark. Maybe Will checks in for a segment. I don't know. We're playing it by ear. It's the Play It By Ear week. We'll talk to you tomorrow from 4 to 6 here on Hail Varsity Radio.